Once you learn a little bit about non-duality, you'll start to wonder, what's the point? Well, what is the point? You guessed it, there is no point. So non-duality means not to, and it offers you nothing, gives you nothing. You learn nothing from non-duality. It's just what is. And so my name is Russ Rapp. I bring new ways of seeing non-duality. And so what does it really mean? Because as human beings, we want to give meaning to everything. So when we talk about non-duality, why do people even want to talk about it? What's the point of that? And I think the reason for that is because a lot of times in life, in development, we feel stuck. And the truth of non-duality means or says that we are not stuck, because ultimately there's nothing to be stuck with. There is no one to be stuck in general. So it's kind of like the ultimate freedom that you can give yourself. And so, because if you think about it, right now, today is January 1st, 2020. Happy New Year. Feliz Navidad. A little bit late, but we celebrated it here today after the fact. So when you talk about the new year and the new beginnings and stuff, you're probably thinking, hey, I'm going to make a plan. We're going to make some New Year's resolutions, and I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to, study A Course in Miracles. I'm going to do this and do that. I'm going to try to lose weight. I'm going to try to not drink as much. I'm going to try to be nice to people. And if you think about it, if you stop for a moment and stop listening to me babble, how is this moment different than any other moment? So we say Happy New Year is this monumental event, but essentially this moment is just like the moment from before. It's just like 2019. It's just like 2018. And so if you think about it, when you talk about non-duality and you start to think about, who is the doer? Who is the one that is concerned about non-duality? Who's concerned about outcomes or the future, the past? And when you start to really dig into who you are, who I am, it's kind of like a moving target that you can never catch. And so from moment to moment, you're constantly changing. And so if you at one moment you define yourself as this, the next moment you're different. Like you're different than you were as a baby. You're different than you were as a teenager, depending on how old you are. And so you're constantly changing. There's this constant change. So there's nothing that you can ever really nail down as to say that's who I am. And then if you think in this moment, who am I? Am I these hands? Am I this body? What is that definition of who you are? Because you can obviously lose a hand and that's no longer part of you. So it's kind of a mental concept that's constantly changing and never fixed. You can never really put your finger on it. And so that's where, when it comes to non-duality, this moving target means that you can never really define who you are. And even if you talk about your essence or habits and stuff, your essence essentially, like how would you define that? When you start talking about who you essentially are, you start to give meaning to that as well. And so whether you're talking about personality or soul or essence, it's always something that you're defining as who you are. Because it's in this moment, it's hard to define who I am, Russ Rapp, in this moment in comparison to everything else that's going on. Because you may not be watching this video on January 1st because it's 7 o'clock here, and it'll probably be later on in the future. And so the future is now. When you're watching this video, it's now for you. And so I think I said and so probably about 4 times already. What was my other point? Let me give you the disinterested stare. Oh, yes, that was my point. So when you think about postmodernism, you're trying to break down all the structures, trying to break down all the social cathectedness, if you want to call it that, where, what is the essence of everything. And I think when it comes to non-duality, it's kind of like taking a postmodern perspective of breaking down the established order to the fullest extreme, if you will. Because if you only take it so far, then your whole focus is tearing down what is, and what is in the moment isn't necessarily a bad thing. So you kind of throw out the baby with the bathwater, if you will. But when you talk about taking to the extreme, then nothing needs to change, because everything that is, all these structures, all the habits, everything that exists in this moment that you perceive always has a back door, like the key master from the Matrix. Yeah, okay. So there's always a way out. There's always another way, and so you're never stuck. And so when it comes to defining non-duality, once you make it something that you can believe in, once you give it meaning in itself, or it's something that you can become, or something you can understand or know in this moment, then it becomes a religion, it becomes a belief system, it becomes something that you can point to, you can say this is what it is, and that's not what non-duality is. Non-duality is the open door. Non-duality is knowing that you're not stuck. And so when you have to take it all the way to the end, all the way to the end of the structure, we're saying that everything is torn down. There is no person. There is a person. Every belief system that you have is just what it is. And so there's no necessarily any reason to change anything. But as a human being, as a developing person from birth all the way through death, you're constantly changing, you're constantly learning, growing, or maybe you're not growing, maybe you're going the other direction and you're having a rough time. So, but in that process, there's nothing that really you can really point to and say that's who I am. And so you're always constantly breaking down these ideas of who you are and becoming something new constantly. And so when you talk about non-duality, a lot of people talk about the absolute versus things that change the perception, the identity of self and object. But ultimately, it's the same thing, because if you take it to the farthest end of the spectrum, the farthest, what do you call it? Yeah, the farthest part that you can go, they end up in a circle coming back to one again, because everything that's constantly changing, there's no anything that can be, because it's once it becomes something, it's not that anymore. So it's never nothing. So in a sense, that's the absolute. So we see the world in duality, but ultimately it's the absolute manifesting self as the duality. So non-duality is all of that, encompasses everything. So hope this makes sense.